this is the, what is today? May 22nd, 2019, Citizens Advisory Committee monthly meeting. And do we have any members of the public present who wish to make a comment? Okay. Has everyone had a chance to read the summary of actions from last month? Any additions or corrections? Okay. Entertain a motion
I'll
to
make
accept.
a motion that we approve.
Okay, thank you.
I'll second it.
All right. Did you get those, Fifi? All right, thanks. Okay, next we have general business. Has everyone taken a look at the attendance log to see if the record for themselves is correct? I'd like to take this opportunity while we're at the attendance log to welcome a new member from Pleasant Hill, Haley Bauer, right? And Haley, would you introduce yourself, please?
So I'm Haley. I'm from Pleasant Hill. I've lived in the area about 6 years. I'm currently a policy analyst at UC Berkeley, and I've been there about 10 years. Definitely very interested in community and how things are developing and changing as we kind of move into this period of kind of more growth for the area.
All right. Thank you.
Filling some great shoes. Chad, we're all going to miss Chad too, but welcome aboard. Mr. Chairperson, we have a motion that was then seconded. Should we vote aye or nay to pass?
I always seem to forget that.
Don't worry about it.
Thank you for watching out for me. All right. All those in favor of passing this motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay. Don't apologize. That was right on. Thank you. Okay, the meeting calendar has our next meeting scheduled for June 26th. So if you would, mark that on your calendar. All right, and that brings us to our first major discussion item. And tonight we're reviewing Contra Costa County 2016-2017 Growth Management Program Compliance Checklist. And it looks like we have a representative from the county stepping forward. Please introduce yourself and
All right. Thank you, Vice Chair Wyrick. Hi, my name is Robert Sarmiento, and I'm a transportation planner for Contra Costa County. I'm here tonight to present the county's calendar year 2016-2017 Measure J Growth Management Plan Programs Compliance Checklist. Sorry, long name there, which is included in your agenda packet. The county's checklist includes, among other things, a list of general plan amendments approved by the county during the reporting period, the county's annual housing element progress report for actually 3 years, 2015, 2016, and 2017. Next, the checklist includes the county's adopted complete streets policy, the county's adopted growth management element, and finally, the county's local street maintenance reporting forms for fiscal year 2015-16 and fiscal year 2016-17. That concludes my presentation, and I'm available to answer any questions the CAC may have. Thanks.
Okay. Any questions for our representative? I have one while others are thinking about it. We're aware that, the county is responsible for the unincorporated areas, and could you briefly go over what those areas are? I know Bay Point is one, and what else do we have in the county?
Okay, I'll start from in West County and move east central, then east. West, and Sonia, please add any if I forget, in West County at least. But West County, there's Kensington, North Richmond, Maltown Manor, Tara Hills, Rodeo. I'm in Crockett, and as I move to Central, there's Pacheco, Contra Costa Center right outside here, Alamo, Blackhawk, Diablo, and then moving east, there's Bay Point, Knightson, Byron, and Discovery Bay. And another one is Bethel Island.
Okay. That's quite a list.
Yeah.
So hopefully the 2.6 million will go a long way towards any repairs that need doing. Okay. So much for me. How about anyone else with questions?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a suggestion. I read your the report. On page 2.1.20, has to do with the La Marinda area.
Okay.
2.1.20. I believe that's, yeah. Okay. The only thing I want to mention, just a request to you, and I don't need an answer really, but we're trying to get people into public transportation in that area, in the Moraga, Rinda, Lafayette area, to get them to BART primarily. That's where they're really going, or from BART into one of the communities. So whatever you can do to encourage that, would be greatly appreciated, because right now, during the peak hour, the bus system, the CCCTA bus system, comes about every 20 minutes just during the peak, but the rest of the time it's like every hour. Nobody's going to use it every hour, frankly. Maybe some students that are going to St. Mary's College or that type of thing. So we would encourage you to take a look and see if there's anything you can do to maybe, even if the frequency of the buses got down to 15 minutes, I think that would encourage people. When I say 15 minutes, I don't mean maybe midday, but certainly during the peak hour. So on their way to the BART system, it would probably be very helpful, and I think it would encourage people to do it. It's kind of like a chicken and the egg thing, you know. If you don't have it, they're not going to do it. If you have it, it might encourage them to do it. That was all. I wasn't asking for anything else.
And you're referring to County Connection.
Yeah. Excuse me. Yeah.
Yeah, I regularly work with them. We County Connection and County. We're both on two regional transportation planning committees. So, yeah, next time I see County Connection staff, I'll definitely relay this information and see if there are any options they have to increase transit frequency in La Marinda, especially to BART. I think County Connection, they're aware of that already, so I think they've already maybe made some attempts to increase frequency, but I'll definitely relay additional encouragement for greater frequency.
Hi,
Hello?
I'm your representative,
Hi, Patty.
and I live in Byron, and I would like to know where you are on the airport connector.
Okay. Currently, we're in the planning stages of the Byron Vasco connector. It's currently somewhat funded. It was actually one of the projects listed in the Regional Measure 3, the regional measure that would increase tolling on almost all the Bay Area bridges. So there is a little bit of funding for that. As I mentioned, we're still doing planning studies, and then once that's completed, we'll move forward with additional environmental or design work. But that would be down the road.
Would it be possible for you to come out and speak to our MAC? They're always asking me questions about what's going on with that, because it's really important to us. We have a big project going on called St. Anne's Village that on Camino Diablo, and I live on Camino Diablo, as everybody here knows. I've told them many times. 20,000 cars are on that country road every day. So if you could come, or maybe we could meet afterwards, or you could give me a call, it would be really great if you could come out and give us an update.
Okay, I'll see what I could do, whether, to meet with you afterwards or set up a meeting or to come out to present on the connector at a future Byron.
That was great. Do you work with Susan Miller as well?
No, Susan Miller's CCTA here, so I work
Okay.
with county. You mentioned the St. Anne's project. I'm actually actually reviewed that project from a transportation planning standpoint. Like the impacts of the development on the surrounding streets. So yeah, I'm aware of like the impacts it would have on Byron Highway and is it Camino Diablo. So yeah, I made some comments to ensure that, or I passed some comments over to the project planner to ensure that the traffic impacts are mitigated, that there's still pedestrian and bicycle facilities. So yeah, we're being aware of those traffic.
We don't have any of those, of course. You already know that.
Yeah.
Yes.
But introducing a development like that, where seniors may not have a car and may want to walk or bike, so we consider bike and ped facilities for that development.
Right, and I'm assuming that you are looking at reinstituting BART buses, which we had in the very beginning and don't have now. But I'm assuming you're looking at all of that.
Yes, we are. And when you refer to buses, are you talking about like Tri-Delta Transit or a private, like a
Tri-Delta.
A Tri-Delta. Okay. I'll definitely work with Tri-Delta to see, what kind of service they could provide to that development. And since it is a senior housing, I realize the importance of having,
Yes.
some kind of alternative to a car for the residents there.
Yeah, we're very excited about the project in Byron.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay.
I have
Sonia?
I just kind of a comment, and then I'm just curious. So for the city of San Pablo, there were some big improvements around the El Portal exit and on-ramp, which I think improved traffic a lot. And then there were some bike lane improvements. But I think now, really trying, and I think it's reflected in the plan, but just want to make sure it doesn't go away, which is to improve bike routes and pedestrian safety going from El Portal and then up like Church Lane through San Pablo and then onto San Pablo Avenue, and making San Pablo Avenue that whole all the way down, making it much safer for pedestrians and bicyclists, because right now it's just not very safe at all, and at least until it can connect to the Ohlone, Greenway, and then people can hop on there to finish their commute. So I see it reflected in here. I know that through WICTAC, they've put that on there, but I just want to make sure and emphasize that we want to keep that, and that's really important for the city the city has plans also to just make modifications so that we're not a route for big rig trucks and diesel trucks, and discourage people from coming off the freeway and utilizing the thoroughfares like San Pablo Avenue as a way to get around traffic on the 80. But so that's all on there. We just want to make sure that stays in the plan.
And
It's really important.
the county has representation on WICTAC, the West County Regional Transportation Planning Committee, and I think we work to find a bike alternative for San Pablo Avenue that works for the county and for the jurisdictions along San Pablo Avenue.
I had a question. I'm amazed at how many of the action plans relate to the county. Usually the list is a lot smaller, but I guess since you guys are so broad, since the county is so broad, there's a lot that apply. I was looking at 36. I don't know if you know this off the top of your head. It's also a bike question. It's talking about installing where appropriate bicycle lanes as part of any future roadway improvements to the corridor. Talking about Camino Pablo and San Pablo Dam Road. I was thinking about San Pablo Dam Road specifically in El Sobrani, where it goes from I-80 Dam Road intersection, San Pablo, down through El Sobrani down to Appian Way. That's part of the countywide bicycle. That's specified in the countywide bicycle plan as a bike route, but it's kind of a insult to cyclists to call it that because it's a really dangerous road to ride on. And I just wanted to know if there's anything coming up in the future to make that section more bikeable, because it's really not currently.
And can you repeat again which road and which section exactly?
Yeah, so San Pablo Dam Road between in El Sobrani, between the Interstate 80 intersection, which is eventually going to be all reconfigured, we hope, and then going the other way towards Orinda, but before leaving El Sobrani, I think Appian Way, that's where the county designated bike route goes to get people to Pinole. But it's signed, but that's it. It's really not. There's no improvements, and so I wanted to know if that's something coming up.
What I'm aware of, there was a study on Appian Way to provide bike facilities. I'm not. I don't know off the top of my head how the scope of that study, if that included the sections of San Pablo Dam Road that you're talking about. What I could do is take a look at the study and see if it includes that, or if the county has any other plans to improve the bike network on the streets that you mentioned.
Yeah, specifically San Pablo Dam Road, because that's in El Sobrani, that's unincorporated. Appian Way is getting into Pinole, and I think it's part of Pinole's three-corridor specific plan, but the unincorporated part, the county would look into.
Okay.
Okay, do we have any more questions?
Just one very quickly. The three traffic studies that were executed, that were listed on here, mentions that there were traffic studies done. One was relative to bakery, another industrial area and stuff like that. One of them, the bakery, said the request was withdrawn. What was the disposition of? Do you know what was sort of the impact, or were there any decisions of actions to be taken? If those, it just said that reports were filed for these traffic studies, and I just wondered if anything had precipitated action had been precipitated from them.
Not that I'm aware of, but I could check. For these three studies, there was actually one project planner for all three projects because of given the proximity. What I could do is ask the project planner if there were anything precipitated from these studies. But as of now, I'm not aware of any.
Thank you.
Okay, I think we may have exhausted our questions. Or, Patricia, do you have another?
No.
Are you ready to make a motion?
Yes, I am.
Okay.
I so move that we accept the compliance checklist for the unincorporated areas in Contra Costa County.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Sonia is second. Thank you. All those in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? It passes unanimously. Thank you very much, Robert, for your presentation.
All right. Thank you all.
Okay, and now we'll entertain a representative from El Cerrito. And if you would just briefly introduce yourself, and you can take right off then with the presentation.
Good evening. Chair, committee members. My name is Yvette Ortiz, the City of El Cerrito's Public Works Director, and I'm glad to be here today to update you on the city's growth management program. I'm not sure if you're all familiar with the City of El Cerrito, but generally we're a small city of about 25,000 people and 4 square miles, and we're in West Contra Costa County off I-80. So tonight I wanted to give you an overview of the action plan, our implementation of the West County Action Plan, specifically transportation projects where we support transit-oriented development or support improvements to transit itself, as well as additional transportation projects that are regional in nature, and also talk to you about our development in El Cerrito, and summarize some of our housing policies and production. And just also at this point wanted to tell you in terms of what we do for development mitigation program. Our general plan does include information and requirements for development to pay its fair share, and several policies in our land use section, our growth management element, and our public services element that require development to pay its fair share. We've also actively participated with WICTAC in its update of its sub-regional transportation mitigation program, which began in 2016 and was just recently adopted in 2019, where all the cities adopted the new program. So moving on in terms of transportation projects that support transit and TOD, we've had several projects that were underway in 2016 and 2017, which is the reporting period, and that have recently been completed. So I'd like to highlight several of those, and some of them are still under construction as well. The first is actually a BART project, the El Cerrito del Norte BART Station Modernization Project. The City of El Cerrito worked really closely with BART staff in terms of the planning and design of that project and supporting their request for funding to WICTAC for a sub-regional transportation mitigation program funding. That project started in 2017, and it's a 2-year project, maybe 3 years, because they did have some design difficulties. So it's still ongoing. That the intent of that project is to modernize that station and improve the customer experience, as well as improve its connection to the city's Ohlone Greenway. And that ties into the next project on this list. The city has a partner project with BART's project called the Ohlone BART Station Area Access Safety and Placemaking Improvement Project. Back several years ago when BART came through town and retrofitted its aerial guideway, it had to rip up portions of our mixed-use path. The Ohlone Greenway runs the length of El Cerrito, right underneath the BART tracks. It's about 2.7 miles, and they rebuilt it to be a wider single-use path. But the sections right next to the stations were not rebuilt because the guideway didn't cross the Ohlone there. So the city applied for federal funding, Measure J, WICTAC STIMP fees to do this project to widen the path right next to the BART stations and create pedestrian zones with improved striping, curb bulb outs, flashing lights at the crossings of the Greenway at the street step board of the stations. And that project was completed, substantially completed in 2018. We also have designed and bid the Ohlone Greenway wayfinding and amenities project. And you keep hearing the Ohlone Greenway, partly because the Ohlone Greenway is right next to San Pablo Avenue, which is a priority development area. And it's our area that's planned for high-density development. And the Ohlone Greenway provides a Class 1 bike facility for all those future residents and residents that live there now, as well as serve the 2 BART stations, and connects to Richmond, and it connects to Alameda County, which is just south of El Cerrito. So there's a lot of emphasis for us on the Ohlone Greenway. And it's also a recreational space. So it's not just a transportation corridor, but it's a recreational space. So the city has been investing. And that project on the top right-hand corner, you'll see some of the wayfinding signs that were installed in 2017. And we did use Measure J funding for that, Measure J, Transportation Livable for Communities. And we were able to leverage Measure J money to obtain state affordable housing sustainable communities funding. So we also were able to install benches, bike racks, and gateway signs near this affordable senior housing project that was recently built, and I'll provide you additional details on that project. We also worked really closely with the City of Richmond to close a gap between the Ohlone Greenway and the Richmond Greenway. They crossed at our north end of town at mid-block, so we worked together to signalize that crossing. And then Richmond also got additional funding to restore the Baxter Creek section of their Baxter Creek section. And last but not least, and I'll get into this a lot more as I go through the presentation, is the city has been busy over the last few years developing our San Pablo Avenue Complete Streets improvements. We also received Measure J funding several years ago to develop a plan for Complete Streets improvements, and that was back in 2014. And now we're basically working on further developing those design concepts in Uptown, and which is the north end of town, and Midtown El Cerrito. So this is the San Pablo Avenue Complete Streets, the uptown portion, which is around the Del Norte BART station. We were able to secure about $4.8 million in federal grants, a Measure J, 2.3, and developer contributions. What this is doing, it's implementing the Complete Streets improvements along this corridor, which includes adding bike lanes there where there are none now, adding crosswalks at signalized intersections where there are none, and people right now, when they go to the BART station, have to cross 3 legs of the intersection to get from one side of the street to the next. So we're closing those gaps so you can just cross the street. We have a lot of jaywalking there now. It's also going to convert a one-way street into a two-way street to eliminate the need for dual left turn lanes in that area, so that we can repurpose some of those dual left turn lanes into landscaping and bike lanes. So we have that funding secured. For the most part, right now we're looking for additional funding to do green infrastructure. And the money is programmed for year 2020, but starting this fall, we're going to start the Caltrans project development process, because a lot of this project limits are within state right-of-way. So these are some of the other steps that we've been doing in terms of this project. We've also been developing the design for the Midtown section of San Pablo Avenue. The city secured a Safe Routes to Transit grant from MTC to do a concept plan to evaluate alternatives on a bike facility in the Midtown section, which is the widest section of San Pablo Avenue. So we have the opportunity here to both maintain parking and add a bike lane and improve pedestrian safety. So it's an exciting kind of opportunity for us. We've been looking at a cyclotrack option, which is protected by parking, and a buffered bike lane concept. At this point, given all the constraints, we are looking at moving forward with the buffered bike lane concept. And this is still in the preliminary evaluation phase, and we have not secured funding for a full design or construction for the Midtown section. But we have been working hard to develop the concept. Okay, in terms of additional transportation projects that are regional in nature or, pedestrian and bicycle oriented, the city adopted an active transportation plan in 2016, and it was an update to a plan that we had adopted in 2007. But we wanted to update that plan to meet the best practices and look at improved bike facilities and also focus more on pedestrian safety. We have a Safe Routes to School project that we also developed using the support of the CCTA technical assistance that they provided a few years ago. And then with that technical assistance, we were able to secure TDA, a Transportation Development Act grant, and are moving forward with construction this summer. And the next two projects are the regional in nature projects, where I'm sure you've heard about the I-80 Integrated Corridor Mobility Project, which is, after many years in development, was activated in 2016, and the city staff sit on that technical advisory committee. And then the I-80 Central Avenue Improvements Project, we've been working really closely for several years with CCTA staff and the City of Richmond to study that project. And Phase 1, which is the Operational Improvements Project, which is, you see at the top of the slide here, started in construction in 2017 and was completed in 2018. And that's the Phase 1 of the improvements that are planned for this interchange, and it basically restricts left turns during the peak weekend hour from Central onto 80 and sends motorists to 580. And so it's an interesting project. It's in its after study phase right now. But there's a Phase 2 project that we're continuing to work with CCTA and Richmond on, and that's the local realignment project, and they're doing detailed design on that right now. The other thing I wanted to mention in terms of City of El Cerrito is something that we're proud of is our streets. El Cerrito voters approved a sales tax measure back in 2008 that was specifically for streets. At that time, the City of El Cerrito had pavement conditions that were like bottom 3 in the Bay Area. And thanks to the funding from Measure A, and we were also able to leverage state and federal grants with it, we were able to bring our pavement condition to top 3 in the Bay Area. And we're continuing that sales tax doesn't sunset because we realize that we need to maintain our streets, and it takes funding to maintain it. So every year we have a regular source of funding to pave our roads. Moving on to development, major development. I wanted to give you some background on development in El Cerrito before I move on to what's happened in the last few years. Back in 2006, the city did several economic development studies to try to figure out how to, get some development going in our city. And what those studies found is that we needed to continue to invest in our infrastructure, that the city needed to invest in its own facilities, streets to improve the physical environment to attract developers. And so we did in those early mid to late 2006 to 2011 invest in along the San Pablo Avenue corridor. We did a creek restoration at the north end of town called the Baxter Creek project. We redeveloped the Cerrito Theater in the downtown or the south end of the avenue. We designated San Pablo Avenue a priority development area. Then we built our new city hall, and it was opened in 2008. And finally, not finally, but one of the streetscape, we did streetscape improvements all along the avenue. It wasn't it included changing the median from just turf to trees and adding like gateway signage and an identity program, and also improving pedestrian safety and some decorative treatments. So that was in 2000. So that led to more. At the same time, we were also developing the San Pablo Avenue specific plan. And the intent of that plan was to really guide the private development, the form of development. And in 2004, the city council adopted that plan. And I have to look at my notes here because this is where it gets into development and I'm an engineer. So the plan is to encourage new high-density, mixed-use, multifamily housing and transit-oriented development. It included a form-based code to encourage development, different types of development along the avenue. And at the time that the plan was adopted, it had been nearly a decade since the city had seen any development. But since that time, we've been pretty busy, and I'll give you some more details about that. But this slide lists other affordable, other housing and development-related policies and programs that the city has adopted in the last few years. In terms of the San Pablo Avenue specific plan, like I mentioned, it was adopted in 2014. Since that time, we've had 19 projects. Either 4 are under construction, 9 are approved, and 6 are proposed. And this summarizes this slide summarizes the number of units, including below market and market rate units. What you see here, more specifically, we've built 81 affordable units in the last 2 years. They're fully built and now occupied. It includes Hannah Gardens, 62 units, and Metro 510, which is at the south end of town, which is 19 units. Let's see. As of December, this is an important note that our housing coordinator wanted me to mention to you, that as of December 2018, the city is one of 24 statewide that is on target to meet our regional housing needs allocation targets at all levels, and therefore we're not going to be required to provide enhanced streamlining under Senate Bill 35. I wanted to highlight a couple of projects that I mentioned. This is Hannah Gardens. It's right next to City Hall. It started construction in April of 2017. It had its ribbon cutting earlier this month. It's 63 residential units, 22 are affordable for seniors, and 1 is a caretaker unit. It has 2,300 square foot commercial space, but they entered into a lease agreement with the city of El Cerrito to build a senior center annex. Right now, our senior center was displaced, and so we're in temporary buildings, and so we're looking for square footage wherever we can find it, and so we entered into a lease with Eden Housing to operate an annex there. The project is really exciting because it includes a public plaza that commemorates the Japanese-American floral industry in El Cerrito. And it also preserved a shop that's right next to you. You can see it in the center image, on the top center image. It's a shop that was restored and is now being used as a community space for the seniors. The initial plan for this project actually had that being demolished because it's not considered a historical building, but our community really pushed to preserve it because it was one of the floral shops that were owned by Japanese. Another exciting project that's mentioned in our action plan is the Mayfair block. This is a former redevelopment property just right across the street from the El Cerrito del Norte BART station. And the city entered into a development agreement. It was approved. The project was approved, and they're about to pull permits for doing their foundation, and it's 233 units, including 67 affordable. This is a summary slide of all the past and present and under construction projects, affordable housing projects in El Cerrito. It's a snapshot. Many of these projects were completed through redevelopment. So for a city of our size, we consider it to be pretty nice. And right now, we're continuing to try to secure funding, leverage private development with our inclusionary zoning policies to build more affordable housing in El Cerrito. I had heard that the committee was interested in accessory dwelling unit policies. The city did amend our zoning code in 2017 to conform with state law, including streamlined approval. We have definitely seen an increase in applications, and between 2015 and 2017, we had seen 9 ADU applications, and in the last year, we've seen 16. So there's definitely been demand for that. And the city council agreed to reduce the building permit fees by 50% to incentivize accessory dwelling units. I wanted to show you some simulations here that kind of that will show how El Cerrito will be transformed. This is the corner of Cutting and San Pablo Avenue, which is at the, just right next to the Del Norte BART station. And this is how it looks today. No crosswalk, no bike lanes, no landscaping. And this is a complete streets improvements that are funded. And so you see the bike lane, you see the new crosswalk, you see some landscaping. That's the Mayfair project we just talked about. And on the left-hand side is Hampton Inn Hotel that was just recently approved. And then on this next image is a conceptual of what the future could look like as that area continues to develop. And I have one more. This is the Midtown section of El Cerrito, a big five there now. Existing conditions, no bike lane. This is a rain garden, though. Let's see. So that's another approved project in the back right corner there. This is another approved project. That's actually going to make a mid-block connection to the Ohlone Greenway, so that's pretty exciting for us because a lot of the existing development has fencing up against the Greenway. And then there's a bike lane, the buffered bike lane, and maturing trees. So that's the Midtown future for San Pablo Avenue and El Cerrito. And that concludes my presentation. I'm available for any questions that you may have.
Yvette, I've just got one word, wow. That was a terrific presentation, and thank you so much for that. I think it could be repurposed. I bet you could sell that to the Chamber of Commerce.
Yeah.
I'm really impressed. All that you've shown us looks like projects that would befit a city 4 times your size. That, I'm almost ready to sell my house and move to El Cerrito.
Come on over. You're welcome.
Any questions?
I do.
Sure.
So first of all, I just want to, City of El Cerrito obviously through this presentation, but we've been watching. I work for Supervisor Joya. Our office is right by Del Norte BART, and so we've been watching El Cerrito just build all of these great, beautiful buildings, living spaces, and building up and utilizing the space so well right on San Pablo Avenue. So just want to compliment the City of El Cerrito again. Just what a great job you all have been doing about building your units. I had a question. You talked about Central Avenue and the improvements there, and I just had a question about that because the Central Avenue is still pretty backed up. So can you talk a little bit more about what the plans are there? Because I've seen people try to bike through there. The traffic gets backed up with the 2 lights so close together. So I'm just curious as to what the vision is, what's going to happen with that. That's it.
I can explain that. I wish I would have brought a graphic on that. But basically, the roadway realignment project that's currently being designed will improve the spacing between the signals. So the plan is right now just on the east side of I-80 are 2 closely spaced signalized intersections. The ramp, the off-ramp, on-ramp, and then Pierce Street, which is a local street in Richmond that serves the Pacific East Mall, which is a regional attraction. And so the goal there, the plan there is to make that right in, right out only out of Pierce. The signal is removed, and there's a new connection from Pierce Street to a street that further to the east, so further away from the interchange. There's a new signal there. There's a left turn pocket there. There's new curb ramps, pedestrian crossing. So you improve the spacing between the intersections and can get better timing. And that's the project that's really expected to provide the most benefit for that area. Thanks.
I had, go ahead.
Excuse me. Thank you for a great presentation, and I really enjoy the art objects you've put on your streetlights going down San Pablo. Are
Thank you.
really interesting. Looking at the Olone Parkway, what are you doing to encourage access to the businesses and facilities between that and San Pablo?
So the San Pablo Avenue specific plan did address that. Any new development or redevelopment has to open up to the Ohlone, both by, putting windows that face that area and providing connections. The one project that will replace Big Five will open up a connection, and they're proposing to install a bike station there, so you can come and repair bikes, get water. So as it's redeveloped, we can require that there's access.
Second question is, the Complete Streets is great. We're all for that. But San Pablo goes down into Alameda County. Do you know what coordination we have with Alameda County to make sure that San Pablo kind of is complete all the way down?
Yes, right now, that's difficult right now because on San Pablo Avenue at the south end of El Cerrito, which is at the Alameda County line, it's the narrowest portion of San Pablo Avenue. So our Complete Streets plan does not identify a bike lane there at the time. It just shows a shared bike route with green-backed sharrows. Similarly, Albany, which is the Alameda County city next to El Cerrito, has kind of sharrows. But as you may be familiar, the Alameda County Transportation Commission is working with the CCTA and WICTAC to do a San Pablo Avenue corridor study that spans both Alameda and Contra Costa County. And they're currently doing a public outreach, and they're looking at 3 options and soliciting public comment on those options. Likely those options, the ultimate project that moves forward will be a hybrid. But the 3 options they're looking at are converting one of the mixed flow travel lanes, the vehicle lanes, into a bus-only lane, so to provide a median running bus rapid transit. The other option is remove parking and install bike lanes, protected bike lanes. And the last option is a lighter treatment, which is what's in our San Pablo Avenue Complete Streets plan, is to do a bike lane, some type of bike facility, do bus islands so that the buses can stop in the lane, more pedestrian improvements, so that's the third option. There's a technical advisory committee, there's a policy advisory committee. It's not simple. We had a really interesting public outreach meeting last week at the city of El Cerrito. We did have business owners representatives come. They're very concerned about the option that removes parking.
Everybody always is with that one. And finally, when BART modernizes a BART station, what does that really mean?
Well, in this case, it means that they increase the paid station area. Right now, for example, the elevator is outside the paid station, the paid area. So they put it in, they add higher capacity stairwells, they improve the lighting and the energy efficiency, they improve the appearance of the station, they also improve amenities for employees, improvements to the restrooms for employees, and they do add artwork to the stations. Overall, we are excited about it. They are adding a lighted glass enclosed stairway that will really make that station much nicer, and it will complement the development that's been approved.
And final question is on the I-80 mobility change.
Yeah.
How is that working? Is there a real improvement there?
Oh gosh, you have to ask Caltrans. But I think overall what they found, the ramp meters work really well. That has proven beneficial. I think overall there's some good and bad, or I don't know if it's bad, but some maybe neutral. What they have found though is that some of the benefit that they might have seen has been far outweighed by the growth in traffic. So that's kind of where they are, and they're still studying it, and they're going to do a report on it.
Okay, thank you.
Yvette, I had one question from your presentation. I think it was the Mayfair development. I noted that there were quite a fewer parking spaces than units, and I wondered, there must be a good reason. Senior citizens close to BART, maybe you can explain that for me.
It's basically close to BART. They could go, I think they could go, it's basically half a parking space per unit or lower. They can get exceptions, but if you're within a quarter mile of the BART station, we allowed in the specific plan much lower parking ratios than if you're in the Midtown section, which is further away from the BART station.
Okay, I figured there was a good reason.
Yeah.
Okay,
I had a quick question.
sure.
Towards the end of the PowerPoint, you had some before and afters of San Pablo Avenue with and without a bike lane. And I was wondering how you found room to add a buffered bike lane. Did you narrow the vehicle lane width?
A little bit of everything. We narrow the median, we narrow the vehicle lanes, we narrow the parking lane.
How narrow are you getting on the vehicle lanes?
11 feet. And we're the turn lanes being 10 feet. We've in our recent meetings with Caltrans, they say that should be acceptable. We haven't gotten final approval on that.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, Edward?
Two things. One, by the way, Chad would be proud. He just missed coming to finally hear that somebody reduced fees for ADUs in some metropolis, but he would have loved to have heard that. My question, however, is about, I saw an extraordinary number of, or a difference, a profound difference between the number of low-income units that were proposed or expected, anticipated, and then the number that were approved. It was basically about 10%, 67 versus whatever. And all 67 of those, by the way, are in the one development that you mentioned, I believe. Is it Mayfair or is it the Hana?
So Hannah has the majority of them, but Creekside at the south end of town also had 19.
Had 19 of them. Okay. So I'm sure it's much like other metropolises, but what was the reason for anticipating one number and having such a different number come out? The developers just wouldn't go there, or?
No, I think that's the units that have been constructed versus the ones that have been approved or are proposed. So there's still approved ones in the pipeline.
Okay, good. So they're not necessarily dead. They just haven't gotten to that stage.
Right.
That's okay. That's good. Thank you.
Yeah.
All right, any further questions for Yvette? Okay. Bruce, as the representative from El Cerrito, would you like to make the motion?
Yes, I would. I would like to recommend to the committee, committee that we accept the City of El Cerrito Growth Management Program checklist for 2016 and 2017, and to pass on to the planning.
Thank you. Do we have a second?
Second.
All right. Mr. Hanson, thank you. All right, we're all set? All those approved? Say aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? It's unanimous. Thank you, Yvette, very much.
Thank you for your time.
Really appreciate your presentation this evening.
It's outstanding. Mr. Wyrick, sir, if I could indicate, I have a hard stop at 7, so I don't want to disrupt the flow of anything after this. If I step out, it'll be quietly.
All right, thank you, Edward. Next on our agenda is an update on the development of a transportation expenditure plan for Contra Costa. And
Good evening, Chair and Commissioners. You may have figured out by now I am not Tim Hale, who is scheduled to present to you this evening. So for those of you I have not had the pleasure of meeting in person, my name is Lindsay Willis, and I am the Director of External Affairs here for the Contra Costa Transportation Authority. So I wanted to talk with you a little bit this evening about the authority's plan to develop a new transportation expenditure plan. But see it changed here. Oh, great. But before I jump into that, I know we have some new members, so I just wanted to give some of the new folks just a quick little bit of history about CCTA. So Measure C was the first measure passed by the Contra Costa Transportation Authority in 1988. It was a half-cent sales tax for 20 years through March of 2009. And it was really intended to build some of the large infrastructure projects that were needed in Contra Costa at the time. The BART stations out to Pittsburgh, Bay Point, from Concord, the Richmond Parkway, some of the other bigger projects. So as that measure neared the end of its life in November 2004, the voters approved the extension of Measure C, called Measure J, for an additional 25 years. Again, it was the extension of the half-cent sales tax, and this helped fund some of the major projects that you're probably a little more familiar with, like the fourth bore of the Caldecott Tunnel and the modernization of Highway 4. So it was the expansion of Highway 4 and the new E-BART extension out to Antioch, including the new interim station in Pittsburgh. So for those of you who don't know kind of the wide breadth of what we do everything from the sidewalks to school buses to ferry service now. With the start of ferry service in Richmond, there's kind of a wide swath of transportation things that our agency is involved in across all corners of the county. And our strategy for success as an agency has really been to get projects shovel ready, to be sure that we can take advantage of leveraging other funds. There are state and federal dollars that are available because we are a county that has our own sales tax. We're able to leverage that. So for example, on major capital projects like the Caldecott Tunnel, we were able to leverage the sales tax 3-to-1 to help fund that project. So by being able to say, come to the table with our own source of revenue, we're able to attract other dollars to help build some of these big projects. So this is a little snapshot of where we are in Measure J at the moment. We're about a third of the way through the measure in terms of kind of calendar timeline. We've delivered about 2/3 of the capital projects so far. So as you can see, I'm a little behind in my notes, of the 88 capital projects, I believe 60 of them are already under construction or currently in construction or completed at this point in time. And the reason we have been able to deliver so many of these projects so quickly is because we bond against our future revenue. So probably the easiest way to explain this is kind of like a mortgage on your house. You can save up all of your money and then buy your house in full, or you can put a little bit of money down and pay the mortgage on a house and live in it and use it and enjoy it while you're continuing to pay it off. That's a kind of a similar strategy to what we use to build some of the major projects and deliver them in Contra Costa County. We bond against that future revenue so we can deliver them to the public faster. You can get your utility out of them now instead of waiting for us to save up all the money to be able to do that, because the longer you wait to build a project, as many of you know, the cost goes up. So the program side of the house looks a little different than the project side of the house if you look at kind of where this odometer is. And that's because we have our capital projects in Measure J. We also fund quite a bit of programs. This is money that goes to local bus service to support paratransit operations, and these dollars are kind of allocated on some sort of periodic basis, whether that's every year, annually, every few years for some of the different programs. So you can see that while we have delivered the majority of the capital program, we will continue through the end of Measure J to fund the remaining programs that are there kind of in whatever time increments were listed in the original Measure J. So these are just some of the other programs to give you an idea that there are a lot that are funded. You can see that the West County Ferry Operations actually says 0 right now. That's because ferry service just began in Richmond this January, so that number will change. This is as of January of this year, so it is a few months behind. The authority board at their meeting last week approved the development of a new transportation expenditure plan. So you have a rather thick handout packet in front of you. So I wanted to give you all of the information that they received at that meeting just so you had it for your own reference. So the first item in there is the staff report, and it shows you the guiding principles that the board adopted for drafting and putting together a new plan, and then some of the benefits that this could bring to the county. And it's actually laid out much more beautifully in the staff report, so I suggest you look there. There's also a lot more information in it. But I wanted to chat with you just briefly about some of the public opinion research that we've done as well for this. The board authorized us to do both quantitative and qualitative research. So the qualitative research was really the focus groups. It was putting together groups of folks in the county to kind of learn what they know about transportation, how they talk about transportation, what they perceive as the biggest problems with transportation are. These were pretty small groups, so you can't really consider them representative samples. It was 5 groups. We did one from each corner of the county, each of the planning regions, and then we also did one specifically targeting younger residents in the county, and that was an online focus group. Each group had about 10 participants in it. I like to joke that it is probably the most depressing part of my job every time we do a focus group, because nobody has any idea who the Contra Costa Transportation Authority is. But it's really great to hear kind of an unvarnished conversation amongst folks, because people really do share their personal stories. So what the takeaway of those focus groups were for us was that people really feel that getting around Contra Costa is not easy. They consider it difficult, but many of them expect it to be difficult by this point in time, and they all have their personal workarounds to make it tolerable to them, whether that's taking a longer, more circuitous route, to going through multiple podcasts in a certain commute session. There's a lot of pessimism that the problems can be solved related to transportation, because the perception of the focus groups was that this is really a desirable place to live. More and more people are moving here, not just to Contra Costa County, but to the Bay Area in general. So even if we manage to make Contra Costa a wonderfully robust transportation, ecosystem, there's still going to be all those other people in all those other counties who are going to be traveling through or trying to move here. They are very aware that the timeline is long to deliver a project. That's not a surprise to them. They also were very understanding that we've reached a point where you can't just go into a neighborhood and widen a freeway. That's not kind of a reasonable expectation, given now that we're built up, especially along corridors like 680, where that would require taking out rows of houses and local streets. But in spite of kind of all of their pessimism about getting around, there really is an appetite for some sort of solution, and they're looking for kind of a big fix. They don't want a bunch of little fixes scattered about. They want something that's really going to change how they get around. There's no consensus, no one big thing, no marquee project kind of that came out of those discussions. Just a sense that things can't keep going in the same direction. So those were the focus groups. And then the board also authorized us to do a quantitative survey of about 1,300 folks in Contra Costa County, as both a telephone poll and an online survey. So you have in your packet the full survey results that were presented to the board last week. I am not a pollster, so I'm not going to try to pretend that I can explain all of these. If you want to hear the pollster explain it, you're welcome to listen to the audio. But I do want to touch on just some of the highlights. So I think if you kind of go to page 2 of the actual poll in your packet, that just kind of tells you when we did the survey. There's a little more than 1,300 interviews done and what the margin of error was. You can see on page 3, and I'm just going to highlight certain pages here, and you can digest the rest at your leisure. We made sure that we did interviews in all 4 of the subregions of the county, and so the results that you see throughout this packet are kind of weighted to reflect the number of interviews that happened. Page 4 has some of the key findings, mostly that transportation is still near the top of the list of things that people are concerned about in Contra Costa County. Voters have some concerns that they don't always understand where their tax dollars are going, and they want to be sure that if they're going to consider paying any more in taxes, they have a really clear understanding that their local dollars are going to benefit local residents, not people who live in other counties or other places. And we tested in this survey 2 different types of ballot questions. One that is called throughout this a traditional ballot question, and one that is called an outcome-based type of ballot question. And I'll get to those in a moment. I just want to point out on page 6 that traffic congestion came in as one of the top concerns, right behind affordable housing, which has been a very hot topic, as you guys know, sitting on this committee, looking at folks' housing elements and just, in the news and I think across the country lately. Page 8 talks about kind of how each area of the county feels in regards to the need for transportation funding. So you can see which areas really feel strongly about that and which areas do not. And so I wanted to just jump kind of to page 10 and 11 to show you the 2 different types of questions that were tested. One is the traditional ballot question, and one is the outcomes-focused question. And so the difference between these 2 is that the traditional ballot question is very similar to the question that was put before voters in 2016 as part of Measure X. It talks about the things that are going to happen. Improve bicycle pedestrian safety, fix potholes, kind of the how we're going to address the problem. On page 11, the outcomes-focused question, the different bullet points that were asked for folks really focus on what those projects are going to do. Improve air quality, make your commute faster. And the reason they tested different questions was because they wanted to see what was resonating with people. What we often hear is kind of the what's in it for me, right? If you want me to give you my dollars, you need to be able to tell me how that's going to benefit me. So that was the purpose of testing these 2 different types of questions to see if this way of talking about transportation improvements was resonating with people who live here more than just the way that it's always been done in the past. We're trying something different. So page 12 and 13 shows you some of the kind of top or items that top the list for residents across the county. This is just kind of an overall snapshot. And then on page 15, it's really broken down by region. And I think what is really encouraging is if you look at page 15, there's a lot of commonalities amongst all the different regions, how it was broken out. Folks want there to be a reduction in congestion everywhere, not just on major highways, on major local roads, on local streets. They just want it to be easier to get around. People want faster, reliable, safer public transit. And that's for buses, that's for BART, that's for ferries. they want to use public transit. The state that the system is in right now doesn't necessarily support them doing that. To speak to your comment earlier about, transit from the town of Moraga, I think that was something that many corners of the county have similar type of experience or story about. It's not going to go through all of this, but part of the direction that the board gave staff as we look towards developing a transportation expenditure plan is to focus on a plan that has outcomes that are things people understand and can hang on to. So we're leaning towards kind of the outcomes-based type of plan. How do we put together something that achieves something people can point to, that does actually ease congestion, that does actually maybe help improve air quality, or helps make transit more reliable or more predictable, cleaner, safer, those sorts of things. The board has also instructed staff to look towards developing a plan that could be placed on the ballot in March 2020. So this is a very short timeline. And you can see you have a more detailed schedule in the staff report. These are just kind of some of the highlights of where we're at and what the process will likely look like. There's anticipated to be a draft transportation expenditure plan released in June by the board for the public, stakeholders, everyone to weigh in on. The plan will be based upon the 2016 transportation expenditure plan. The board is not expecting to start from scratch. We're actually going to be looking at that plan, and some things have been funded already in the few years since that plan was put on the ballot, with like Regional Measure 3, the toll dollars. BART had their own measure on the ballot at the time, so the 2016 plan had money in there for BART cars that have since been funded from another source. So they'll be looking at what things have been funded since 2016, what things still need to be funded, and kind of what new things might be needed for the future. And then probably the other highlight you'll see up there is in August, they're proposing to essentially adopt a kind of a more final version to share with cities, because the cities in the county do need to actually vote on the transportation expenditure plan. And then it goes to the Board of Supervisors ultimately for a decision to put it on the actual ballot itself. So the ballot actually, that has to happen in November because the ballot gets finalized in December. And for those of you who maybe vote by mail voters, you'll be seeing that in your mailboxes in probably February. So it's a very quick timeline compared to how this is done in the past. And so I was actually really excited to hear you all talking about different projects that you wanted to see in your areas, and having really specific questions, because your regional transportation planning committees, we call them the RTPCs here, have started to meet to put together essentially their wish list for inclusion in the transportation expenditure plan. So I encourage you to reach out and make sure that if there is something in particular you want to see, that that's on the list for your regional transportation planning committee, because they are a big source of input into the transportation expenditure plan. I do know that the Vasco-Byron connector is something that has been approved by the RTPC for inclusion in your area. I did make a note of that earlier. So I do encourage you, they actually, and Matt, correct me, I think they have it agendized every month, right, from now through nearly the end of this process on each of their agendas to take input. So it's going to be a very different process than it was in 2016 when we went through this. We're still developing the public education and outreach plan, and actually that was kind of one of my asks of you as a committee, we're planning to do public meetings, we're planning to do telephone town halls. One of the things that we're looking at doing is partnering with community-based organizations to co-host those meetings, because we know it's summertime, we know people are busy. We're really trying to reach out and go where people already are, instead of trying to get people to come to a meeting. So if there are organizations in your community that you think would be a good place for us to go and talk to folks, you're welcome to send it to Fifi and Matt, and they can share it with me, or Fifi can share my information with all of you via email, because we'd really love that. You guys are the ones in your communities every day. You probably have a better sense of it than me if I were to just pick some organizations off a roster. So we would really value your input on, the different places in your community that you think really need to be heard in terms of putting together this plan. And so with that, I know I kind of threw a lot of stuff at you very quickly, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Just a few questions. Do you need 66 2/3 to pass this?
Yes, so this is not a majority. You do need 66.67% of the vote
Because
to pass the
I
measure.
looked at the survey that was done, although it was, it was a survey and there's room for error. I guess you think it can make 66 2/3?
So this is an initial survey that the board asked to have done to kind of gauge public sentiment and interest on the topic. It is likely not the last survey that will be done before the board makes a final decision about putting it on the ballot. Keep in mind that the survey is done before there's been a plan actually developed. So we had to make a bunch of assumptions in here. We used the last transportation expenditure plan as kind of a guidepost of what we might ask people about in terms of a sample ballot measure. But the elements of the plan have not been decided by the board yet. So we kind of had to just put some likely options out there to see what the public would react to. I would anticipate that the board will probably do another survey before they make any final decisions about moving
The other
forward.
question, Lindsay, is there a limit when it comes to sales tax? A state limit that you can't go over?
So there is a statewide limit. Currently, the Contra Costa Transportation Authority has the ability to exceed the sales tax cap, because some of our cities have a very high sales tax, some are below. So we had to get a piece of legislation passed that would allow us to exceed the sales tax cap in Contra Costa County. That legislation actually expires December 31st, 2020. So there's like a time limit on it. We can go out and ask again to have that authority extended to us. It does go through the legislative process. That's how you get that. So yes, and the reason that that authority exists is because if it didn't, then some cities would be able to kind of take advantage of the half-cent sales tax and some would not.
Okay, thank you.
You may have answered that question. Would be increasing, if this passed, would be increasing sales tax.
So yes, the board hasn't made any decisions yet. In 2016, the proposed half-cent sales tax was actually on top of Measure J. So Measure J goes through 2034. What the board put before voters in 2016 was something that would be kind of sit on top of that and be an additional half-cent for 30 years. So it would kind of extend past the life of the existing Measure J. I do believe at the next board meeting, the board will be looking at revenue projections and starting to make some decisions about a term and, what the actual terms, what that would look like.
And also looking at the survey between the yes, no's, and between the outcome focused and the traditional ballot, Was there any discussion as how many of the traditional 65% shifted to the 30% of the second one and back and forth?
So what the research firm presented to us kind of at the end about the traditional versus the outcomes-based was they did ask, I think, one kind of negative, they put some negative information in front of the voters that were surveyed, and then tried to see how well each of those held up to that. So their assessment was that the outcomes-based type of question held up better to negative arguments than the traditional.
Thank you.
If there was one project, I know you commented on this, one project that you can get everybody really interested in, is there one project out there you think that everybody would go, yeah, this is great, you know, like the Caldecott Tunnel, that kind of an idea?
That's a really loaded question. I would say the one thing that I heard consistently from everybody was if you could make traffic disappear, that would be the best thing that you could do for Contra Costa County. So, but in terms of a specific project, there was not a single one.
Beam me up, Scotty. Any further questions for Lindsay?
Yes.
Okay.
You did talk a little bit about our airport connector. Measure X was not supported by Far East County because they didn't know about it. They weren't informed. I talked to a lot of people that just didn't even know. Even Discovery Bay people didn't understand what that was really going to do. If and when the board does pass this, we really need to, or you really need to, look at the people it's going to really affect. They really need to know what's going on. And the sad thing about this whole airport connector is at least a third of the people that use Camino Diablo, of those 20,000 cars every day, are from Mountain View, and they live in another county. And so we have to contend with taking care of people that we can't get any money from. So, you know, there's just a lot going on there. And we have a lot of people that are very concerned and would be willing to help. So please keep us informed. Thank you.
Just a quick comment on your community outreach. Consider using Nextdoor, so the social media that I know my neighbors read that 25 times a day. So.
Great.
All right. Well, it looks like there is no further questions for you, Lindsay, and we appreciate your presentation very much.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
All right. Next on our agenda are committee reports from the CCTA. Has anyone attended any meetings that they'd like to report on? Okay, seeing none. Any member or staff comments? Okay.
Point out that staff will continue to keep this committee updated on the process that Lindsay just described as it proceeds through the next several months.
Okay. Thank you, Matt. Do we have any correspondence or news clippings? All right. Any future agenda items that anyone would like to propose? Okay, for another day. I guess we're at the end of this meeting then, and we're adjourned until June 26th, 6 p.m. Thank you all very much. Thank you. Safe journey home.